The title of this is Basic of Crimes Research Part 3. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about ways to express the same concept using various numbers. So we'll cover rates, proportions, percentages, and something called over and under representation. Okay, proportions. Think of these as fractions, if you will. We can express what proportion of West Oahu students are seniors. Okay, we can use a rate or a percentage to do that. It's true with any population you can think of. We're going to, I'll show you how to use this really old data, but we're going to sort of say, well, what proportion of violent crimes actually cause an injury to the victim? We're going to look at what proportion or percentage of the U.S. household population age 12 and older had an assault with a serious injury, etc. And then we'll look at the proportion of the U.S. prison population. It's actually people who are incarcerated at a certain year, and we're going to talk about over and under representation. Okay, the most basic kind of proportion is a percentage. Okay, so we can turn it into a fraction. So again, pretend there were 100 students in the class and 25 of them were seniors. Put 25, which is the characteristic you're interested in, on top. Put the total number of the population, which in this case is class, on bottom. So you have 25 over 100. You divide 25 by 100. You divide the top number by the bottom number. You will get 0.25. You multiply that by 100 and you will get a percentage. All I want you to do is look at that thing on the bottom. The fraction and the percentage express the same exact thing, just in different ways. Okay, rates also, we could take that fraction or percentage and express it as a rate. They're typically used for large groups, nations, or states. During the COVID pandemic, you may have seen data whereas they would give you per 100,000 residents, how many of them had COVID, how many of them were in the hospital, etc., per 100,000 state residents. Sometimes you'll see a per 1,000. Rates are especially attractive when the percentage is below 1%. But if you understand percentages, they're all the same information. So just remember, we can use a fraction, a percentage, or a rate, and they all express the same exact concept using a different way. Okay, so remember we said that 25% of the West Oahu students were seniors, right, in that one class. So if you express that as a rate, you can see the two ways to do that. So if there were 100, that would be 25% is the same as 25,000 per 100,000, or 250 per 1,000. Again, you could put the big numbers on bottom, the smaller numbers on top, create a fraction, right? Same idea. So these rates say the same thing. Okay, and then next I'm going to sort of look at assaults, and we'll use percentages and rates to look at some assaults. Okay, don't focus on the year here. This is old data, but all we're going to try to do is sort of say two things. What percentage or proportion of the U.S. household population suffered an assault with a serious injury, and then as a percentage of all assaults, what percent of assaults result in a serious injury. Don't worry about the difference between a simple assault with injury and aggravated assault. Don't go too deeply into that. One way that is explained to me by a guy who collects crime statistics is that a simple assault with minor injury is something that may need a Band-Aid, but certainly doesn't require, a bandage. It doesn't require anything major. The way to think of an aggravated assault with injury is, again, these aren't legal definitions, but just sort of to conceptualize it. It's something that's a little more serious than a Band-Aid, right? It's a little more serious than a bandage. You might need some sort of formal medical attention, maybe need an ambulance call, etc. Okay? So we will look at aggravated assault with injury, right? So look at the rate for that. For every 1,000 people in the U.S. household population age 12 and older, 2 of them suffered an assault, an aggravated assault with an injury. That is the same thing as 0.2%, which is the column right next to it, or the middle column. Okay, the rate and the percentage say the exact same thing. I personally like the 2 per 1,000. I'm able to put my head around that a little easier than what the heck is 2/10 of 1%. I can sort of picture 1,000 people. That's, maybe half of the UH West Oahu campus. So of half of them, 2 of them suffered an aggravated assault. Obviously, it doesn't apply to West Oahu students, but that's a way to conceptualize it. Okay. So we could also say, well, as a percentage of all assaults, you look at the far right column, that's why you have 100 at the top, right? As a percentage of all assaults, 7.3% of them were an aggravated assault with serious injury. Okay, so the vast majority of assaults to the U.S. household population age 12 and older do not result in a serious injury, but about 7% do. Okay, so key is that rate and percentage say the exact same thing, just in different ways. Okay, you can just pause this and read this for a second if this doesn't make sense, but we're going to talk about overrepresentation and underrepresentation. So pretend that people with brown hair made up 20% of the general population. I made this up. Okay, don't read into that. So everything being equal, we'd expect 20% of the prison population to have brown hair. If more than 20% of the prison population has brown hair, we would say that brown hair is overrepresented. If less than 20% had it, we would say it's underrepresented. Okay, you can apply this to anything. It doesn't have to be a prison population. It could be the population of professional football players in the National Football League if you wanted. Okay, so in this case, we're applying it to prisons. Okay, if we look at this is actually people incarcerated in state, federal, or local jails. Okay, in mid-year 2000, don't focus on the year, focus on the concept. So you can also, please don't focus on the terms that are used for the various ethnicities or races, if you will. Remember, race or ethnicity is a social constructed thing. There is no biological basis if you look at DNA. But these were the terms used in the report. Okay, that's why they're here. Okay, so the raw numbers are pretty useless. What's more important is per 100,000 of each of those groups. Okay, you can look at the rates. Okay, so you can see 683 for whites or haoles, 4,777 for African Americans or blacks, right? So what that means is that blacks or African Americans are incarcerated at a rate that is 7 times that of whites. So these are males, okay? And then Hispanics are incarcerated at a rate that is 2.5 times that of whites, okay? So those are approximate numbers, obviously, but it tells you something is going on, something needs to be explained. This is the only simple explanation is this is an example of systematic racism. If there was not systematic racism in incarceration rates, we would see all of those should be equal. But in fact, people with darker brown skin are overrepresented compared to people with much lighter skin. Okay, so that's something going on there. It needs to be explained. Unfortunately, there is no simple explanation for why that occurs. It's very, very complex, and I don't want you to fall into soundbite thinking. But I do want you to at least acknowledge there's something that needs to be explained there when we see that. You can pause this again and just read it. This is just written down what I tried to explain in the previous slide. Okay, that's the end of the lecture.